Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.
Rock Talk.
Welcome back. No banging on the table. Remember that New Hampshire Taxpayer Radio? People would pound on the table and the microphones would pick up everything.
Or Obama at his lectern.
Alan Keyes used to do that when he had the television show. He was always clapping his hands. I'm like, Alan, you're going to lose your show. Clap.
All right. Well, great day so far. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check us out online at GraniteGrok.com, TheRockandHCR.com, and Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Ustream, and more. Go to GraniteGrok.com to find out all the fun places that you can check us out. And while you're there, make a donation to help support the program, because this is a non-profit enterprise by a bunch of workaday schlubs who do this as a hobby.
And everyone wonders why.
And everybody wonders why, including us, but we still do it, and we have listeners and readers, and lots of them. So with that in mind, we like to bring on guests who have something important to contribute to the conversation. This morning, I would like to welcome the Director of Federal Affairs at Americans for Prosperity, Chrissy Harbin. Good morning. Chrissy, you there? Oh, hang on, I pressed the wrong button. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
Hi, good to have you here. Let me make some adjustments here, press the right button so we can talk about some really interesting news. Of course, it's been a pretty busy week for news, but one of the good things that happened was that the Supreme Court blocked the far-reaching EPA Clean Power Plan from going forward while the rule is challenged in court. People may not necessarily be familiar with the fine details, so why don't you explain that to us?
Absolutely. So this was some rare good news that we saw come out of Washington this past week, and it relates to some of the overreaching new rule on carbon regulations, emissions that we've seen from President Obama that he proposed 2 years ago. What the Supreme Court did was issue a stay on the rule, which shows that they think that there is merit to all the legal reasons associated to oppose the rule. And this is very important because it ties in very closely with a lot of the work that we've done at Americans for Prosperity to oppose this harmful rule in the states.
So one of the things that I wrote this week was about Governor Maggie Hassan, Governor of New Hampshire, who wrote a press release in which she said she was very disappointed that the Supreme Court had stepped in and actually done its job and basically prevented the executive branch from just randomly creating law with the force of with fiscal force, taxation, and so on and so forth. In our particular situation, our Republican senator, whom she's challenging for the U.S. Senate, Kelly Ayotte, agrees with her. So let's say, ideally, this is something that should be handled in Congress. What kind of support level is there either direction for CPP or maybe on the other side, rolling back EPA power?
Yeah, well, the important thing to know about the so-called Clean Power Plan, the president's new rule on carbon emissions, is that this is really the cornerstone pursuing his green energy agenda in his last year in Congress. This is the same kind of energy program that we've seen with loan guarantees, tax handouts to special interests in the green energy industry. So it's not just this rule that will have very little impact. This is one of the biggest mandates that will prop up green energy that we'll see coming from the Obama administration. And that's why it's so concerning to see many Republican lawmakers, including Kelly Ayotte, come out and endorse this plan, because we have seen over time that all these handouts that prop up special interests in the green energy industry have been a really bad deal for American taxpayers and ratepayers because they face this threatens their access to affordable and reliable energy. So it's certainly very concerning to see Republican lawmakers like that who claim to oppose the president's energy agenda, but yet support the Clean Power Plan. To answer your question about support on Capitol Hill, there is waning support. We've seen Congress pass a congressional resolution. They overturned this. Well, they expressed disappointment on this rule and a similar rule on existing power plans. I don't have the vote count in front of me, but it certainly passed overwhelmingly in both the House and the Senate.
Gentlemen?
I look at this, and Steve had written a good piece that I quoted again, and he's done a wonderful job. How much further down the road are we going to go to the progressive, i.e. incremental socialist, administrative state, where basically it doesn't make any difference who gets elected or what? The administrative state, blown up to the Leviathan size that it is now by both Democrats and Republicans. How much longer is it going to be before we just give up the ghost here? I mean, we all fight for this, and I'm glad to see what you guys do, but maybe I'm just having a dingy day because of how cold it is here and how cold it's going to get up here in New Hampshire the next couple of days with the Arctic vortex coming down. But I see democracy in the Congress getting chilled to the bone and frozen in place, and the administrative state just keeps on going and going and going. Is this something that will continue until Obama's out? And if a Republican president is voted in, is it going to go away, or will it just keep on going, just at a slower pace?
Well,
lots there.
That's a lot of doom and gloom, and unfortunately, I don't have an optimistic answer for you. What we've seen over time, especially over the course of the Obama administration, is really support within both political parties to spend more and allow federal agencies to grab more power and expand their reach. We've seen executive agencies grow not only in their budgets, but they're grabbing power from state legislators or in states, by passing these overreaching regulations that carry the force of law, but in also doing the work that Congress should be doing. We see the EPA and the Department of the Interior and many federal agencies right now essentially enact these rules that carry the weight of statute. They're regulating they're legislating when they should be regulating. And that's certainly very concerning. And unfortunately, although I don't have a crystal ball, I predict we'll see even more of that in the final year of the Obama administration.
This is Ed Nail from the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. I'd like to see a regulatory committee or some group regulate and just mandate term limits for Congress, since they've already mandated power limits to Congress. Why not just take their terms too? That would at least we get new faces once in a while, to look at instead of the same old ones.
Well, it would certainly make my job a little harder. A lot of new faces, the names to learn. I do think that's one proposal that we've heard kicked around here as a solution to the problem. There remains. This is going to be. We need a lot more. We need a lot of. One of the problems with our spending problems, for example, is that although Congress has a lot of rules related to the budget, they waive these rules all the time. There's a problem with how they score bills. They score them over the 10-year window, which means that they can hide cuts in the out years and then spend more now, and then pass and then just continuously shift this budget window, which means that these cuts never come due. So we need some more enforceability of the rules that we already have. We also need to seek other ways that would bring restraint to federal spending. I
have been on this. Well, actually, as a rule, we have this saying: "Screw DC, save New Hampshire." We're states' rights, state sovereignty, local control. It's kind of our thing. AFP is in a lot of states, maybe all of them. I'm not sure. But is there, from knowing what you know, working for AFP, how much effort is there and how much success do you think we could have solving some of these problems at the federal level by really pushing state sovereignty, states' rights, and local control?
Absolutely. Live free or die. That's what I really admire about your state's motto. There is a lot. The answer to your question is there's a lot that states can do to protect themselves from these overreaching rules. And a prime case in point is the so-called Clean Power Plan, the rule that we were discussing earlier. What the EPA is doing is it requires states to submit an implementation plan. So states have to get together and find a way, tell the EPA how they're going to rearrange their electricity grid in order to comply with these very aggressive forced cuts in carbon emissions over the next until 2030. That's why this stay that the Supreme Court recently issued is so important, because beforehand states faced a deadline of September in order to send a plan to the EPA. But now, since the Supreme Court put this on hold, that deadline goes away. That's why it's so important for states to just do what they can to push back. Legislatures can pass legislation to push back. Governors can sign executive orders to prohibit their state from implementing it. It's so important that states do nothing and stand up for the people living in their state who are going to face these huge costs.
And I think, Chris, this is Mike. Am I on? Yeah. Sorry. So, Chris, this is Mike. I actually think I was about to mention pretty much what you just said, which is the states have no obligation to participate in this whatsoever. It is not a law, and it is not pursuant to any section of the Constitution. So, therefore, it doesn't have supremacy. And since it's just dreamed up by an agency, which is also not faithfully executing either a law or the Constitution, is invalid. And we simply need the states to say no and hell no in as loud a chorus as possible, and just say this shall not pass our border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's really interesting too is to look at recent Supreme Court decisions. So while the Supreme Court here just issued a stay, it hasn't actually heard the case or overturned the rule. It's essentially we're to wait and see until the Supreme Court does do that. It did have a recent ruling on a similar rule on mercury emissions that also forced a number of power plants across the country to shut down and threaten jobs and threaten access to affordable and reliable energy. What we saw there is that EPA overturned the rule, but the Supreme Court overturned the rule. But EPA essentially shrugged its shoulders afterwards, saying, well, this rule has been 2 years into effect. It already achieved its, goals from their perspective. So it was of little consequence, and EPA just went back to the drawing board.
But isn't this different, though? Mercury is a toxin, and nobody is disputing that, even though the Democrats keep accusing Republicans of wanting to poison people. CO2 it's a necessary component of both human and plant life. Essentially, though, the greater meaning is that here you've got this regulatory agency on its own deciding this is what the energy usage creation is going to be in the U.S. without legislation. And you tie that together with the WOTUS rule that they want to do, Waters of the United States, which basically puts the EPA in charge of how we are going to allow American citizens to use energy and create it, as well as now the EPA is looking for universal land planning and regulation nationwide by this single entity, which it basically overwhelms the local control, be it state or even county level or local government. It's basically turning the idea of federalism on its head. Do you think that's going to come to play if this thing goes to the Supreme Court?
Well, I think you make a very good point about how the EPA is attempting to regulate land, air, water, all aspects that in its overreach, and that's very concerning from the perspective of folks who live far away from Washington, because these forced emission cuts, these rules related to what constitute how people can use their land is coming from Washington in a top-down strategy. So that's certainly very concerning, and it's something that we'll see more over the course of the Obama administration. But this is where state leaders can stand up and push back in various ways. They can stand up against the overreaching WOTUS rule, for example, and say, highlight how EPA has clearly overstepped its authority. The mercury rule, while yes, it's not completely analogous, it does show that the Supreme Court found that EPA has not taken its costs into account, and that some of the rules that it sent were overreaching. So in that regard, it is good precedent, and hopefully it bodes well for our side, for opponents to the rule.
But have we not, in effect, abdicated, seems to be today's word, the responsibility of the states themselves and the Congress to the Supreme Court? Because the EPA has promulgated rules with the force of their own armed bandits, I might add, that they have no right to produce or enforce. Congress should be passing laws effectively just a reminder that this is not part of the act which created the Environmental Protection Agency, but more to the point, the state should just be standing up and saying, hell no. Nobody needs to go to the Supreme Court for this. It has no force. It is null and void. But
they'll just go after then the EPA will just go after the individual companies, period.
Well, that's where the states should be protecting. Remember, I'm used a little extreme, which is that federal agents have no place in the sovereign states anyway, except by permission of said states.
What do you think of that, Chrissy?
Well, I think it's going to take a team effort. Certainly the biggest challenge to. I think he's exactly right. The biggest meaningful challenge right now is the lawsuit. So a lot of efforts at the state level really hinge on whether the Supreme Court rules that EPA overstepped its authority, and then the Supreme Court decides to overturn the rule. But it's right. It's definitely the responsibility of Congress that Congress should have never let this happen in the first place. Congress shouldn't have outsourced so much authority to executive agencies. So that's a problem here. It's a problem in other rules because we've seen them do it elsewhere.
Fishing.
Absolutely. So that's why, and then it's going to take more responsibility from Congress, but it's also going to take a teamwork from leaders at the state level because they're going to have to stand up and protect their states instead of letting this top-down overreach affect them.
So is more information on your website, AFP?
Absolutely. To learn more about this issue and many of our priority issues at the state level and federal level, go to americansforprosperity.org. And you can also get in touch with our New Hampshire State Director, Greg Moore. He's another great source of information.
Well, we know Greg pretty well.
We know Greg.
We haven't had him on in a while. We'll have to have him on. I'll give him a call. I've been to his house. I know where he lives. I talk to him all the time. He is a great guy. We also know Corey Lewandowski, who used to have that job and moved up and then moved on to the Trump campaign. So, all right, we've come to the end of our segment, and I wanted to thank you so much for spending some time with us this weekend.
Thanks so much for having me on and also for highlighting this really important issue.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. That's Chrissy Harbin. I'm going to take a little break here, and we're going to come back, and maybe we'll touch on this whole New Hampshire Medicaid thing, but who knows? We never know what we're going to talk about.
Excellent. Rock